The Swedes are probably not the first people you think of when you think of the European colonial powers. The Swedes, always known as a seafaring nation, also wanted a piece of the pie in the New World. So they started to take on long sea voyages across the Atlantic. In doing so, they not only conquered colonies in North America, but also spread to Africa and annexed islands in the Caribbean. So today we take a look at the exciting history of the often forgotten Swedish colonial empire. By the middle of the 17th century, Sweden rose to become one of the most powerful nations in Europe, and it reached its greatest expansion. In addition to regions in present-day Norway, Finland and Russia, it also possessed Baltic territory in present-day Estonia and Latvia, and territories in Germany and Poland. And like all powerful states in Europe at the time, Sweden wanted to expand its power further, which is why it turned its eye to America. So Sweden founded the New Sweden Company, which was supposed to support colonization, similar to the West India Company of the British and Dutch. Thus, the company's first task was to conduct tobacco and fur trade in North America, as well as to establish a first Swedish base in the New World. To assist them, they recruited the experienced Dutch explorer Peter Minuit, who had established the colony of New Netherlands in what is now Manhattan for the Dutch several decades earlier. However, he was fired by his employer and now wanted to get back at the Dutch. Therefore, he helped the Swedes establish a colony in a strategically vulnerable part of New Netherlands. So in 1637, the Swedes established a first base called Fort Christina in what is now Delaware, named after the Swedish Queen Christina. Subsequently, the Swedes spread further and further along the Delaware River and built the other bases Fort Elfsborg and Fort New Gothenburg, in addition to increasing trade with the locals. The main problem, however, was that among the Swedes, their enthusiasm for the colonies was not as great as in other European countries. So only a few Swedes and Finns moved to America, and the colony never had more than a few hundred inhabitants. In addition, pressure grew from the Dutch, who still considered the area around the Delaware River to be their own territory. So when the Swedes continued to expand there until 1654, the Dutch retaliated. They were clearly superior to the Swedes and therefore forced all Swedish outposts to surrender within a very short time, which meant that New Sweden was lost after less than 2 decades. But that was not the end of the Swedes in America. But first, let's look at Africa. From 1650, Sweden intervened increasingly on the African west coast. It founded the Swedish Africa Company and assigned its most capable men to acquire a colony in Africa. Thus, in April 1650, the colony of the Swedish Gold Coast was founded, covering the coast of what is now Ghana and Togo. Several outposts were established, such as Fort Karlsborg and the capital Fort Christiansborg. Sweden used its colony primarily as a base for the Atlantic slave trade, shipping African slaves to the Americas. But even the African colonial empire was very short-lived. The Swedish governor of the Gold Coast changed sides after a dispute and sold the territory to the Dutch. But when the Swedish king refused to give up the territory, the Dutch besieged Fort Christiansborg, and after a long defense by the Swedes, they were able to conquer it. But only a year later came the British, who again claimed the coast and eventually established the British colony of Gold Coast. Sweden's colonial adventure was then interrupted for over 100 years. It was not until 1784 that the Swedes started a new attempt in America. In exchange for trading rights, it acquired the Caribbean island of Saint Barthélemy from France, which can certainly be described as a successful colony. The island grew to an important trading post in the Caribbean and was very popular with emigrants from Sweden, but also from other European countries, mainly because of its liberalism and religious tolerance. The colony existed for more than 100 years. Only in 1877 Sweden sold it again to France, because in the meantime a lot of French people lived there. By the way, during the Napoleonic Wars, Sweden also owned the island of Guadeloupe for about 1 year, but after a short time it had to be ceded again. The final question is, what did the Swedish colonial empire leave behind? Despite the few colonies, the Swedes left their influence, especially in America. On the one hand, they brought Lutheran Christianity to the New World. On the other hand, they established the log cabins, which later became an integral part of North American architecture. Today, about 1.3 million Swedes live in the United States. That was it with the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in the Austrian colonies, I can recommend you my last video where I talked about this topic. See you in the next video, and I say bye.